The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, a single sheet of paper that would destroy everything Elena Morales had left in this world. Elena Morales stood barefoot in her small kitchen, the coffee in her mug gone cold. At 68, the retired elementary school teacher had lived quietly on the edge of Willow Creek Estates for decades. The 47 acres surrounding her modest home were not just land, they were her grandfather's blood and sweat, the man who crossed the border in 1940 with nothing but a dream and a shovel. He planted citrus trees here. He raised her father here. And now, this letter from the Willow Creek Homeowners Association claimed it was all gone. She drove the cracked two-lane road toward the property line, heart pounding. What she saw stopped her breath. Rows of gleaming McMansions stretched across the rolling Texas hill country, their red-tiled roofs shining under the brutal San Antonio sun. Children laughed in perfectly manicured yards. Luxury SUVs lined freshly paved streets. Her grandfather's old orchard, the one she still walked every Sunday morning, had been erased. 96 homes now stood where her family's history once grew. Elena clutched the faded survey map in her trembling hands. She had driven here to show the HOA representatives the iron property markers her grandfather had driven into the earth himself. But when she reached the new community gate, a security guard turned her away. "Private property, ma'am. You need to leave." She called the HOA office. Patricia Harrington, the board president, refused to meet in person. Instead, a polite email arrived within the hour. "We kindly ask that you cease harassing our residents. All matters have been reviewed and approved through proper legal channels." The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly as Elena stood alone in the middle of what used to be her access road. Golden light caught on the expensive fountains in front yards. The distant sound of a lawnmower mixed with children's playful screams. She looked down at the old map, then up at the pristine houses built directly over her family's gravesite. The small plot where her grandfather was buried under an old oak tree that no longer existed. In that moment, the full horror crashed over her like ice water. These people hadn't just taken her land. They had built their American dream on top of her family's bones. And the HOA that was supposed to protect the community had signed every permit with full knowledge. This couldn't be happening. Elena spent the next 3 weeks buried in paperwork. She scanned every deed, every tax record, every yellowed letter her grandfather had saved. The old iron marker she had noticed that first day, the one slightly shifted from its original position, kept appearing in her mind. At the time, it seemed like nothing. Now it felt like the only truth left. The first blow came in the mail. A formal demand letter from the HOA's attorney. Pay $18,000 in retroactive assessments or face liens on her remaining property. Patricia Harrington's signature sat neatly at the bottom. The second blow was more vicious. The HOA produced meeting minutes claiming Elena had voluntarily relinquished access rights years ago. The document carried a forged signature that looked vaguely like hers. When she demanded proof, they refused. The third blow came on a quiet Thursday evening. As Elena tried to walk the old path toward her grandfather's burial spot, 3 patrol cars arrived. Neighbors she had never met stood on their porches, arms crossed, watching as officers ordered her off private property. One young mother even shouted, "Just go home, lady. You're scaring the kids." She recorded every interaction. She hired a cheap surveyor. She stayed up until dawn, building her case. Then came the Zoom meeting. Patricia Harrington appeared perfectly composed on screen, pearls around her neck, a soft Texas smile on her face. Behind her hung expensive framed art. "Mrs. Morales," she said calmly, "we're all just following the rules. The development was approved years ago. Good faith purchasers are protected under Texas law. I suggest you accept the generous settlement we offered." Elena's voice cracked. "You built 96 houses on my land." Patricia barely blinked. "The board reviewed all boundary surveys. Everything is in order." Her tone was polite, almost kind, the same tone she had used on 3 previous homeowners who quietly sold and left after similar disputes. This wasn't the first time. In that moment, Elena understood. The moved property marker from that first devastating afternoon wasn't an accident. Patricia had known. She had known before the first foundation was poured. The screen went black after Patricia ended the call. Elena sat alone in her dimly lit living room, fists clenched so tightly her nails drew blood. This woman wasn't just enforcing rules. She was weaponizing them with a smile. The court order arrived without warning. A temporary injunction froze Elena's access to the entire 47 acres. Her land, her grandfather's gravesite, was now legally off limits. The judge cited community stability and good faith development. Elena lost the first piece of herself that day. Her first lawyer quit 2 weeks later. The man had sounded confident in their initial meeting, but after a closed-door call with the HOA's legal team, he returned pale and apologetic. "Mrs. Morales, the pressure is considerable. I'm sorry. I have to step away." Another door slammed shut. Elena sat in her kitchen staring at the empty retainer check she could barely afford. Trust in the system she once believed in crumbled to dust. The neighbors turned next. What began as cold stares became open hostility. Parents whispered when she walked past the community gate. A group of residents started a petition calling her a threat to property values. One evening, someone spray-painted "Go Home" on her old wooden fence, the same fence her grandfather built by hand in 1952. She had lost her land. She had lost her faith in justice. Now she was losing the last fragile threads of human connection. At 3:17 a.m., Elena sat alone in her dimly lit living room. The yellow glow from the old desk lamp spilled across her wrinkled face, illuminating tears that fell silently onto the open family photo album. Pictures of her grandfather smiling among citrus trees, her father as a boy riding a horse across the same fields, now buried under million-dollar homes. The house was deathly quiet. Only the wall clock ticked, slow, merciless, counting down what felt like the final days of her fight. Maybe I should just let it go. The thought slipped out in a broken whisper. Her shoulders shook. For the first time in her life, Elena Morales, the woman who taught 3 generations of children to stand tall, felt truly ready to surrender. The weight of 96 houses, endless legal fees, and total isolation pressed down until breathing itself hurt. In that suffocating silence, the old woman looked smaller than she had ever felt. Then the phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end would change everything. The stranger on the phone was a former surveyor named Robert Klein. He had worked on the original Willow Creek project 12 years earlier. "I kept the real maps," he said quietly. "I've been waiting for someone brave enough to use them." Elena didn't sleep that night. By morning, she had new legal representation, a sharp young attorney from San Antonio who specialized in land disputes. Together, they filed an emergency motion with the original survey, the shifted iron marker, and Klein's sworn affidavit. The truth began to crack the foundation of Patricia Harrington's perfect community. The first reversal hit when the local news station in San Antonio picked up the story. Widow fights for grandfather's grave buried under luxury homes. Overnight, the narrative shifted. Residents who once glared at Elena now stared at their own manicured lawns with uneasy eyes. Then came the second blow. Another former board member stepped forward. She revealed Patricia had personally ordered the boundary marker moved to maximize developable lots. Documents proved Patricia knew the truth before the first shovel broke ground. The board's good faith defense started to collapse. One by one, the layers peeled away. Residents discovered inflated fees, hidden reserve accounts, and other quiet abuses they had never questioned. A small group of homeowners began meeting in secret. They weren't radicals. They were simply tired of being controlled by fear. The final reversal came on a golden Texas evening. The court lifted the injunction and ordered immediate negotiations for restitution. Patricia Harrington resigned as board president the next day. Her polite smile finally gone. Elena walked slowly toward the entrance of Willow Creek Estates as the sun dipped low. She carried only one thing, an old black and white photograph of her grandfather standing proudly among his citrus trees. She stopped at the grand stone entrance, not shouting, not crying. She simply stood there in silence, back straight, eyes fixed on the land that once belonged to her family. Several residents gathered at a distance. No one spoke. A young mother holding her daughter's hand looked at Elena, then at her own home, then back again. An older man removed his hat. In that quiet moment, something shifted in the air. Not victory parades, not dramatic cheers, just ordinary people beginning to see. Elena Morales stood alone no longer. And in that single, dignified image of an old woman refusing to disappear, many who watched her story would later ask themselves the only question that truly mattered. If this was my home, my family, my last stand, would I have the courage to stand there too?